let's talk about something that is honestly one of the most confusing and painful things that can happen in any relationship. When someone you know just vanishes. They just disappear from your life, and you're left with absolutely no idea why. I mean, have you ever had this happen to you? One day, everything seems fine, you're connecting, and then nothing. Just radio silence. You rack your brain trying to figure out what you did wrong. It's so easy to feel hurt, confused, even rejected. But what if? What if it has almost nothing to do with you? And this right here really gets to the heart of it. What we see on the surface, what it feels like to us, cold, arrogant, like a direct personal attack, is almost never what's actually going on underneath. The reality is often much closer to someone being completely overloaded, desperately trying to protect their peace, or even just surviving. So let's call this what it feels like, a vanishing act. But the trick here is that it's not what you think. It's almost never this random, malicious thing. Instead, it's usually a signpost pointing to some really deep psychological patterns that a person is trying to navigate. Think of it this way. When someone suddenly cuts you off, their brain has pretty much flipped a switch into protection mode. It's a self-preservation instinct, almost like a circuit breaker tripping to stop an overwhelming emotional surge. So, let's break down what actually causes that switch to flip. All right, first up, let's look at the immediate here and now reasons for this distance. These are the things that can push a person's brain right to its absolute limit. The first big one is psychological overload. Just imagine your brain is like a phone battery. Every bit of conflict, every piece of criticism, every emotional demand, it just drains that battery. And when it hits 1%, the brain has to make a choice. It shuts down everything it considers non-essential to conserve energy. And in that moment, communication can feel very non-essential. For them, silence isn't an attack. It's the only way they can find a charging port. Now, the second reason is something called a boundary awakening. And this one is huge, especially for people who have spent most of their lives just tolerating way too much. And this process is pretty wild. You see, for years, this person might have been a people pleaser, letting boundaries get crossed left and right. But then, one day, they just hit a wall, a breaking point. And when that happens, the shift isn't slow or gentle. It's sudden. It's absolute. They realize the only way to guard this newfound sense of peace is to build a fortress. And sometimes, that means cutting off the person who kept knocking on the door. Okay, but it's not always about what's happening right now. Sometimes the reasons for pulling away are much, much deeper. They're rooted in old wounds from the past, or even in who the person is trying to become in the future. A really powerful driver is something called betrayal sensitivity. If someone has been seriously, deeply hurt in the past by someone they trusted, their brain literally gets rewired. It becomes hyper-alert, like a watchdog that barks at every shadow, constantly scanning for any tiny sign of future pain. I love this quote from our source material because it puts it so perfectly. That silence, that distance, it isn't a sword they're using to hurt you. It's a shield. It's a defensive wall they've built to make sure that old, devastating pain never, ever gets inside again. And then, oh man, there's the emotional support person. We all know this person, right? They're the one everyone unloads on. But look at this breakdown of their energy. The vast majority of it is spent carrying other people's problems, leaving just a tiny sliver for their own recovery. Sooner or later, that leads to total burnout and ghosting. It becomes a desperate act of self-preservation just to get some air. And finally, sometimes people disappear because they are in the middle of a profound personal change, what you could call an identity reconstruction. This can happen after any huge life event, really. A breakup, a new job, a failure, you name it. And the most important thing to get about this one is that their distance isn't a judgment on you. It's not about you at all. It's a reflection of their own messy internal struggle to become someone new. Those old relationships can feel like anchors tying them to a past self they need to let go of. And sometimes, rightly or wrongly, they feel the only way to sail forward is to cut the ropes. So, with all that said, why does this actually matter for you? You know, the one sitting there in the silence. Well, because understanding the why behind their actions is the key to finding your own peace. Look, if there is one thing to take away from all of this, it's that it is almost never personal. Their silence is a sign of their internal struggle. It's about their attempt to protect their mental state. It's a signal of their need for space. And here's the kicker. Understanding this isn't about making excuses for them.
It's about protecting your own sense of self-worth from getting tangled up in someone else's chaos.
So I'll leave you with this question to think about. We usually treat silence like it's just an absence, an empty void. But what if we started to think of silence as its own language? A language that speaks volumes about overload and boundaries and pain and transformation. If we learned to listen to that silence, what do you think it would tell us?